Well, let's continue our discussion with Acting Director General in the Department of Communications, Dr. Mashilo Boloka, and he's in our Pretoria Studios. And also just a reminder, the public has until mid-July to submit issues for consideration regarding the SABC. Well, Dr. Boloka, let's talk about the SABC. So yesterday it was mentioned that the department would be looking at changes with regard to the funding model and also governance issues amongst others at the SABC. What exactly prompted that?
Okay, the issue of appropriate funding model for the SABC has been consistently deferred in South Africa. It's not a new issue. It started in the mid-90s as we are preparing for the transformation of media in South Africa and rebuilding the SABC for the new democracy. And then we have been consistently saying that we'll review the appropriate model. That's why at the moment you got that fixed, mixed funding model, which is largely commercial, and then TV licenses at about 17 to 18%, and then the remainder coming from government, which is very small. Therefore, we have to think about if we really want the SABC as a public broadcaster, which is the heartbeat of every nation, how do we ensure that the mandate that has to deliver gets funded? Because a crucial issue, you can't say that the SABC has to be a public broadcaster that deepens democracy, but you allow it to go and fend for itself in the market, because you are actually saying that before they think about informing, educating and entertaining the nation, they have to first of all go and make revenue. That's why even now some of the developmental programs are sometimes not prioritized, and understandably so, because first of all the SABC has to meet the commercial needs of the advertisers so that it can remain afloat. That's why this issue, I think for us, we thought in this review, we should deal with it head on so that finally we can say this is the best way of funding our public broadcasting services.
So what are some of the ideas that have been floated, or will you be putting quite a bit of weight on the public submissions in this regard?
Well, that's why we want to engage South Africans through a consultative process. The first one starting with the notice that the minister has issued. It will be gazetted on the 29th, and then it will run for about 30 days. We want the public to help us to come up with that, instead of that funding model being a top-heavy approach. A few years back, we tried to say that it should be done through government, but the question is, does government have enough resources? I mean, the chair of the SABC, Mr. Makatini, yesterday said the public mandate of the SABC is valued at about 4 billion rand. Then the question is, as South Africa, with all these competing needs, do we have the adequate resources to take care of that? But what I'm saying is that we are willing to be persuaded by South Africans, because at the end of the day, they are the beneficiaries of the services that the SABC has to offer or has to deliver. So they'll better be saying that this is how we think it should be funded. And this is not only a South African discussion. I think people that follow the debates in the US or the UK just completed theirs, I think, last year. The UK, unfortunately, the government said they're not going to fund public broadcasting services, which is a major issue, because the public broadcaster is not just an organization. It's the heartbeat of every country. It is the window through which your culture as a country has been seen. Therefore, you can't just say commercial means is the best way to go. But what we have seen throughout the world is that mixed funding models are the best way to go. But we'll see how it goes then with the debate.
I think many South Africans would be concerned about interference, political interference, and how that new funding model may impact on this. Because if the public broadcaster is to be wholly funded through the fiscus, what would that mean for its identity as a public broadcaster?
Look, in the debates that I always have informally with whether members of the public or, individually, I always say it's not given that if a public broadcaster is funded by the fiscus or government, then there shall be interference. I'll give you a very classic example. The SABC has always been commercially funded since it was established. Now, even during the National Party government, they were not funding it, but the level of control by the then government was beyond imagination. And you can also see in countries such as Australia, where it's funded by the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, is funded by the government or public means, but it's not interfered with. Because I think one thing that I'm happy about is the independence of the SABC is a protected terrain in line with Section 192 as well as the Broadcasting Act. And I don't think there's any temptation by government in one or another to muzzle the SABC. That's why we want to put in accountability measures to make sure that indeed the SABC account to the public and not necessarily government. That's not the intention, but our intention is how do we ensure that the SABC is able to discharge its mandate in a manner that is financially or is sustainable instead of having to be worried by the commercial.
Dr. Boloka, we are out of time.
You are funded by commercial means.
Unfortunately, we're out of time, but just a final one on those submissions, the submissions from the public. How can they do that?
Okay, the Gazette, like I said, will be published on the 29th. And then in that, there will be a specific date on which the submissions have to be made, as well as the details where people should submit those submissions and how they need to do that. So they should wait for the Gazette. We'll also issue a media statement around that to alert the public, whether on public media platforms or GCIS or any platform that we think our South Africans are using.
Well, thank you so much. And that was our guest, Acting Director General in the Department of Communications, Dr. Mashilo Boloka. And the public has until mid-July. We're going to look out for that Gazette, and we'll inform you about the dates and, of course, where you can send those considerations regarding the SABC. It's time now for the latest news. Over to Leanne.